Okay, today we're going to look at the if statement. If is the selection statement, is the keyword if. If is used with the keyword else and also with elif. And so today, if you go to the schedule from our homepage and click on any of these links to get to the schedule, we're going down to week 2 and 3. And here we are in week 3, class 1. Click on processing and selection. Now today we're going to do section 4.5 on selection, so scroll down to find section 4.5, and as usual I'm going to give examples using Python. So select the Open Python idle and you will see the Python shell, and let's click on File, let's have a new file. And the new file I'm going to save as, let's call it if.py, and I'm going to save to the desktop. So saving on the desktop if.py, and there it is. Now we've seen the if statement before. We can say something like this: score is 97. And then we can say if score is greater than or equal to 50, don't forget the colon there, then when you press enter, you'll notice Python gives you 4 spaces. Don't delete those spaces. That's known as indentation. Indentation is part of the if statement. So start to type where you see the flashing cursor. So if their score is greater than or equal to 50, we want to print you passed the course. And press enter there. Let's see if this works. So the score is assigned a value of 97. 97 is assigned to the variable score. Then the if statement will then look at this Boolean condition. This is either going to be true or false. If this is true, then this will be executed. So I'm expecting it to say you passed the course. Let's run. And I'm going to save first and then run. And it says you passed the course, which is exactly what I expect. Let's move that down there. Right, so now we have a program that checks this condition to see if it's true or false. If it's true, then it will print you passed the course. Let's close this now. Let's improve this. Let's input the score from the keyboard. Now the score is going to be an integer, so I'm going to input an integer. So that's int input please, let's say please input your score. So I'll put a space there, close the quote, close the bracket. Now we have to close 2 brackets because there are 2 opening brackets. So don't forget to put 2 brackets there when you're inputting an integer. Now I can put in any score now. When I run this code, I can put in a score, any score I like. So let's save this, run it. Please input your score. Now let's have 98. And it tells me I passed the course. So let's close the shell, and let's say, let's try, see what happens if I put in a score of less than 50. Let's put in, oh no, that's bigger than 50. Let's put in 43. Oh, it didn't do anything. Why didn't it do anything there? Why didn't it print anything? It's because it had nothing to do. This is only executed if this is true. Now we didn't say what it should do if it's not true. Now to do that, what we need to do is go back to the start of the line and put in an else clause. Now the else, under the else, you're going to type whatever you want to be executed if they do not pass, if they get a score less than 50. Now type else colon, press enter. Notice Python automatically gives you 4 spaces here. This is known as indentation. And notice the indentation is to the same level as the indentation for the if part. So now I want to say print you failed. Okay, now let's see what happens when I run. I save, I run, and this time it asks for the score. And let's enter 43 again. This time it says I failed. So when we run this, it restarted the code. There's the old run. This is the new run where I've put in the else part. This time it says you failed. Now, if I want to say more than one thing on, if you pass, let's directly underneath the first print, I'm going to put print well done. Now you can have as many statements as you like underneath the if, as long as you put them in a straight line directly underneath each other. You can have one or two or as many statements as you like underneath here. And the same with the else part, so I could say print better luck next time. So let's try this again. This time I'll run. I forget to save, so I'll just click OK there. And it says, please enter your score. Please input your score. This time let's do 75. And it says you passed the course, well done. Now let's test it again. Make sure everything runs correctly. Let's this time put in 50. And I still passed, well done. And this time let's put in 49, and of course I should fail on 49 because 49 is not greater than or equal to 50. So this time it says you failed, better luck next time. Okay, so I'm going to close that. Let's have a look at some of the example programs. Now, if you scroll down here, it refers to different example programs. So where are these example programs? Well, you'll find them at my homepage. Let's go to my homepage, amdawson.net, and you can find the programs actually in the schedule. So let's go to the schedule. The example programs, you can find them here. I've got links to them in most of the weeks. All of these go to the same example programs. So here we go. Now, the programs for selection start with 04. So let's scroll down to the programs that start with 04. And we've got some examples here of if and else. Now here I've got a program that uses another, it's got two if statements here. So let's just copy this one. And I'm going to copy this and put it into, let's just paste it in here. Right, so this is actually program 04-13. I just copied and pasted. So here I'm entering a score, and this one is a bit different. It's entering the score. Now if you use input on its own, it will always input a string text. So here I'm converting, so this will actually be of data type text or string, and here I'm converting the string into an integer. So you could always check the data type here of this variable. Let's just do that. Print the type of score, and in this case, whenever you use input, whatever variable is created will be a string. Even if it looks like a number, it's a string. Now, if you want to convert your string into an integer, you'd also use this statement. This will take your string, convert it to an integer, and then reassign the new integer to the score. So we could always check the data type of the score variable again, and you'll see it's been changed to an integer. Now, you can only compare integers with relational operators, so you must make sure that you do convert your string to an integer. Now, in my previous program, I did that in one step. I int input. So in one line, I input an integer. In this way, I'm doing it in 2 steps. So let's run this and see what happens. Now, first of all, it's going to compare the score to see if the score is greater than or equal to 80. If that's true, then the grade is set to A. If that's false, then we have another if statement. This is known as a nested if statement. It's basically an if statement that's contained inside another if statement. So if the score is greater than or equal to 80, the grade is set to A. If that's not true, then it's going to see if the score is greater than or equal to 70. If that's true, the grade is set to B. Otherwise, the grade is set to C. Then we're going to print the grade. Now, what are these things here? \n, \n. You might see that in some of my example programs. If you put \n within a string, here we've got a string, then a new line will be printed in that string. So in effect, what's going to happen is Python will print a new line that will show you a space when you when you see the output, and then it's going to print grade is, and then the grade. Now the grade is either going to be A, B, or C. Notice here we're using single quotes, and here we're using double quotes. It doesn't matter. You can either use single or double quotes for defining a string. So a string is text. Use single quotes or double quotes, and it's still a string. So let's see what happens here. Right, so let's enter a score. Let's enter 66. Now notice here, when I asked it to print the type of score in the first place was a string. Converted the string to an integer and then put back into the score variable. Now the score variable is an integer. So it's very important to remember that when you use input will only ever give you a string. And that string is assigned to the variable on the left. If you want to convert your string to an integer, then you will use the int function, and int score will convert your string score into an integer and then put the integer back into score variable. Looking at the output, then you can see that the grade is C. Now the grade is C because what's happened here is if the score is greater than or equal to 80, the grade would be A. This string A is assigned to the grade variable, but our score is 66. So because this is not true, then the else part is executed. Now in the else part, there is another statement, if. Notice that this is indented 4 spaces, and so is this. Make sure that you are using the correct indentation. So after an if, you're indented. After an else, there is an indented. If you've got another if, you have to indent again. And the same indentation is used for the else that belongs to the if. So be careful when you're using if statements to make sure that you don't delete these indentations. They are important. So in my program, what I did was I entered 66. Now, because 66 this is false, then it goes down to the else part. Now, the else part has another if. So now we look if 66 is greater than this, it's false. So it goes to the else part again, assigns a grade of C, then prints 2 blank lines, 2 new lines, and then prints grade is C. And you can see that in our code in the output here. So these two new lines here are a result of these two new line characters. These are known as escape characters. \n means include a new line in a string. And there it is. So here we're using a nested if. A nested if statement is an if statement which is inside of another if statement. So I've introduced escape characters. \n is known as an escape character. We'll see other ones as we go through the course. \n inside a string will give you a new line. It's quite useful sometimes to have \n. Now here I'm inputting the score, and then as we saw, the score originally as a type string, we converted it to an integer, and then because it's an integer now, we can relate it to other integers to see whether the score is greater than or equal to 80. So this program, I basically took it from the example program 04-13. Now, as I said, here you can do the int input on one line, and I'll do that now. That saves you a little bit of typing. We don't need those now. So now what I've done, I've entered the score as an integer in one statement instead of two. Now let's close the old shell, and you'll be able to see that if we enter the number 66, the output will be exactly the same. And there it is. So this is neater to do the integer input on one line. And there you go. Now if we remove these new lines here, then run again, enter the same score, watch what happens. This time those new lines have been removed, so \n in a string will just give you a new line. If you want two new lines, you put \n. It's quite simple. Right, now normally at the college we have more than one grade. We have A, B, C, D. So if we were going to put on, using this method, another grade, we'd have to have another if-else statement. So for example, I could say, I could change this to, no, let's put underneath else. Now let's just copy one of the example programs. There you go. So let's just copy that. That'll save me a lot of typing. So I'll go into here, and I'm going to replace all of this with what I copied. Right, so here I've got A, B, C, pass or fail. Let's run it. And let's have 45. So I failed. Now notice you're only going to get one grade. Let me go back to this here. We're only going to get one grade here. So the grade you're going to get is A, B, C, pass or fail. In this case, what it does, it checks the score. If it's greater than or equal to 80, you get an A. If it's not, then it goes down to the next if. Is it greater than or equal to 70? Well, mine wasn't. So it goes down to check the next one. So if it's false, it will always do the else part. And the else part can always contain an if statement. So now at Whitlam College, we've got A plus, A minus, B plus, B minus. We'd have to do a lot of typing here, and these lines you have to make sure that the indentation is correct, and the program will be going right the way across the screen. Now this is not a good way of writing a multiple selection statement. It becomes very confusing. You have to make sure that all the spaces are exactly correct, otherwise it doesn't work. So there is a better way, obviously. So let's go down to see the better way. This is, I'm going to show you this one. Let's do this one, and then we'll finish here. So what we're going to do is we're going to input the score, and Paste that. No, I've done the wrong thing there. Let's just delete that part. And I'm going to copy this from my example program 04-15B. And I'm going to paste that in here. Now this is much neater. We're now using the elif clause that belongs to the if statement. Elif is basically short for else if. Now before we were using something like this. If something is true, do this, else, and then a nested if. So we're trying to do else if, else if, else if. Now there is a short way of doing this. We use the elif keyword. You can only use elif if you start with the if keyword. And I'll explain how it works. I'll run it and then we'll finish there. So here we're inputting an integer for the score. Then we have an if statement. Now, an if statement gives you a selection. If you use one if statement with an else, you've got a choice of two. We saw how you could pass or fail. If score is greater than or equal to 50, you pass, else you fail. Now we've got multiple choice, multiple selection. So we're entering a score. We check to see the score is greater than or equal to 80. If it is, they get an A, and then this statement is finished. So as soon as one of these is true, then we finish this if statement, and then we continue on to the statement that continues after the if statement. This is the if statement. If this is true, you get a grade A, and then we go straight down to here to print grade A. If this is not true, then you go to check the next one. So we go down to the else if part. So, for example, if I enter 90, then this is true. The grade is an A. And then we finish the if statement. It goes straight down to print grade A. So let's run that. So I'm going to close the old shell. And I'm now going to run this code. And here I'm going to enter a score of 90. And my grade is A. So if this is true, it gives you an A. And then it's finished. It doesn't bother to look at these because they're no longer relevant. And so it simply goes down to display the grade. So let's try another. So I'll close the old shell. So let's see if we can get a pass. Now a pass, if you get a score of 55, let's say we enter a score of 56. Well, 56, you don't get an A. You're not going to get a B. But 56 is greater than 55, so you'll get a C. Once you get your grade, it's finished. So as soon as a grade is assigned, then it goes down to print the grade. So let's type in 56 this time. So enter the score. Let's enter 56. Now remember 56, this is false, so you don't get an A. This is false, you don't get a B. But this is true, so you're going to get a C, and then it will skip down to print the grade. And there it is. So this is an example of a multiple selection. So depending on your score, you're going to get an A, B, C, pass or fail. As soon as one of these is true, this will be executed, and then the if statement is finished, and it will go down to print your grade. Now, if none of these are true, A, B, C, or D, then it will go A, B, C, or pass. Then it will go down to the else part. So if none of these are true, it will then execute the else part, which is fail. So let's just check that one. Let's type in a score of 49. 49, this is not true. So it go down to check this. This is not true. This is not true. This is not true. So it will execute the else part and give you a grade of fail and then print that grade. So let's run this with a score of 49. I'll close the old shell there. I'll run this with a score of 49. So 49 will give you a fail. But let's end this movie on a positive note. And I'm going to run it with a score of 95, which will give you a grade A. So remember to run the example programs. Have a look at them. These are very useful. You can just copy and paste them into a Python window. And so I'd like you to try running all of the example programs. You don't need to type them in. You just copy and paste into a Python idle window, and then save and run. So I'm going to end on this program. This is program 0415b.py. The next movie is going to introduce how Python repeats program statements. We're going to start off by looking at the while statement. So that's the end of this movie.